PSG versus Real Madrid. This is PSG. This is Real Madrid. PSG started in a 4-3-3. We got Donnarumma in goal. We got Nuno Mendes, Beraldo, Marquinhos, Ashraf Hakimi, Vitinha. He's the number 6. Fabián Ruiz, Neves, Kvaratskhelia, Dembélé, the false 9. And over here we got Doué, the dribbler. Real Madrid surprisingly also started in a 4-3-3, not a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3 that Xabi Alonso has been doing in the more recent matches. We got Courtois in goal. Trent was injured, so we got Fede Valverde as a right back, which he has been playing most of the season, but he's not a real right back. And because of that, we saw some defensive lapses. Although with Trent Alexander, that has also been an issue if playing in a 4-3-3. There have been defensive lapses at Liverpool since Henderson left because Henderson was the guy that played here who covered for Trent. So in this situation, if Trent was available, Real Madrid would probably have a more attacking formation and their attacks would be more effective. But this right side would definitely have been there would have been some vulnerability over there. So we got Valverde, we got Asensio, and that is another problem for Real Madrid as far as defensive actions go. And then we got Rüdiger. Uh, he's aging now, so that's another problem. Fran Garcia, Tchouaméni was the pivot, and then we got Arda Güler, Jude Bellingham, and now comes the front three. And before this match, Xabi Alonso had been starting with Vini and Gonzalo Garcia. So in this match, this was a problem because you have Mbappé, Garcia, and Vini. And because there's Mbappe's available and Vini's also there, it's a problem with who to start, and that disrupts the game of Garcia because he was the center forward, but then later on we saw that he was shifted to the right, and one of Mbappe or Vini had to come to the center. So that disrupted the entire plan, and that is the problem with the Galactico Real Madrid, that they have really good players, but do they have the right profiles for the team they want to build? And that is a problem. That's why Rodrigo has also he's been having problems as well. So at the start, it was Vinny over here. It was Gonzalo Garcia, and Mbappe was the guy who started on the left wing. Real Madrid's idea was to have the ball. It wasn't to sit back as they were during the match and give PSG possession. That wasn't the plan. The plan was to try to dominate the game through possession and with a high line. So when playing a high line, we saw Valverde and Fran Garcia both as high fullbacks, and once these guys had to provide the width through both the wingers playing high, the idea was to get Vini, Garcia, and Mbappe over here, and Mbappe and Vini would then close in, and that's how Fran Garcia and Valverde would provide the width over here. So you got this front five. That was the idea, and then obviously these guys push high in this sort of high line situation. That was the plan, but after the first few minutes, this didn't happen because PSG, the way they pressed and they won the ball back, they're one of the best possession teams in Europe right now. They won the Champions League, and they weren't gonna let them have the ball. So with Luis Enrique and that La Masia background, it was PSG that was going to dominate the ball, especially with Dembele as the false nine and providing the miracle overload at the center of the pitch. Once PSG was going to gain dominance of the match, the way they were going to do it was through Vitinha, the central engine. This is the same way Barcelona used to do it with Busquets, who was the engine of the team. So over here, you got Vitinha as the engine. And then obviously the way PSG was going to set up was that they were going to play three at the back and Hakimi was the guy who was going to move forward. And obviously, if he's the guy providing the width over here, Doué was going to move inside. The way PSG did this was with Vitinha as the engine. The three center backs were Nuno Mendes, Beraldo, and Marquinhos. When that happened and PSG gained dominance, Real Madrid got back in this. It was this flat 4-3-3. That's the way Real Madrid basically defended. And it was very narrow, by the way. It had an effect on the match in the sense that because of their narrowness, PSG got a lot of time to play on the outside and have a lot of time on the ball. And that was a problem for Real Madrid because with a team like PSG, fine, if you're stopping the central flow or the central build-up, which obviously is difficult with Dembélé, the idea was basically they knew that Dembélé was going to drop deep as a false nine. And to stop that, they wanted those line-breaking passes to not reach Dembele, and because of that, what PSG did was they rotated the ball really fast around. For example, if they were on this side, they'd pull Real Madrid over here to this side, and then quickly pass the ball around and isolate Kvaratskhelia so that you can have a 1v1 against Valverde. So the idea obviously was when PSG were playing out of the back with three players, the idea was to have a single pivot, and that single pivot of Vitinha, in order to draw Real Madrid, he would get really close to the defenders. And at times, if Nuno Mendes is moving forward, then Vitinha would also form the back three. But as the match went on, Real Madrid did start to give them space, and basically because they wanted to close down this space over here and keep this very compact central area so that, as I said before, that the line breaking passes don't reach Dembele or these Fabián Ruiz or Mendes as well. PSG's idea was basically to get both the wingers, and both of them are dribblers. So that is one of the reasons they wanted both of them on the touchline to spread out and try to stretch Real Madrid. But because Real Madrid were not doing that, so they wanted to get the ball to Kvaratskhelia or Doué. And because both of them are dribblers, once you do that really fast and Real Madrid is out of structure, you get this 1v1 sort of a situation. And so over here, fine, you got Fran Garcia. He is a proper left back. And because of that, the 1v1, obviously, but Du is really good, so he could beat them. So obviously, Real Madrid wanted to have two players over here to mark him. But I'll show you in a bit how PSG broke through that, despite Doué having the capability of doing it on his own. So they wanted this 1v1 situation once, especially when Real Madrid were out of structure, and then quickly passing the ball around there if this area is blocked to Kvaratskhelia. And because Valverde is not your natural fullback, and there are weaknesses there, so PSG wanted to mostly target Kvaratskhelia versus Valverde 1v1, and because they know he was always going to beat them. So once he did, this is where everybody PSG wanted to overload that box and then get those passes in here, cutbacks or over here, so that they have a pretty good chance of scoring. And they did the same from this side as well. That if they did end up beating the Real Madrid defense, that's the side they wanted to target for scoring. So one of the other problems was for Real Madrid was that because they were compact initially and PSG were hugging the touchline with the wingers. So what was going on was that their tempo of rotating the ball was really fast enough, and with that they would get the ball to Kvaratskhelia, and once he got it, Valverde would have to move out to mark him, and once he did that, the space got created, and so this space had to be filled by Arda Güler. Now, Arda Güler as a profile is an attacking number 10 profile. So And normally, when people are number 10 attacking profile and not that physical, as the match goes on, dropping deep becomes an issue for them. Once you don't do that, it's a 1v1 situation. And in that event, the defender has to move out over here. If this space is open and Arda isn't moving back, then Asensio moves over here. And that leaves this space open. So, and that's how, Fabián Ruiz gets to make his attacking runs, and he ended up scoring 2 goals in this match. Because Real Madrid were going to do this 2v1 on both the sides, PSG had a plan to counter that. The way they did that was they're also an attacking team, and they're one of the best defensive teams as well. So they know they got a very secure defense, even with 2 or 3 players at the back, and they I think they've conceded only 1 goal in the entire Club World Cup. Even in the Champions League, Arsenal beat them on XG, but it was PSG that ended up going through. So they got a really good defense, basically. And so the rest defense is solid. And so what they wanted to do was they wanted to play high fullbacks as well with Hakimi on this side and Nuno Mendes. But the roles of both these players were different. And so on this side, on the right, if Doué is hugging the touchline, then Hakimi is moving inside, which is underlapping. And so now, when this guy takes time to move here, they have enough skill to beat Real Madrid. And so if Doué is outside, Hakimi goes in. But normally we would see Doué go inside and Hakimi outside. And so once you gave him the pass, he would make the run to draw out one of these players. And if you draw one of these players and one's here, then obviously Dembélé drops deep and you get a chance, or Nuno Mendes, because this guy's marking Nuno Mendes. So Dembélé is the open guy. And so you get a chance to connect. So once he makes that run, PSG did normally connect. And once they do that, obviously they want these guys inside to target the far post. The role of Nuno Mendes was different. Basically, on the left side, they wanted Kvaratskhelia to hug the touchline and go 1v1 against him. But when this guy left his space and Güler didn't track back, Nuno Mendes became the midfielder. And he was staying close to Fabián Ruiz so that Fabián Ruiz was the guy who would go into the attack. And so obviously they had a 3 versus 2 situation over here. But the idea was to get Nuno Mendes to act as a midfielder so that this would free up Fabián Ruiz to go for the shots or create these half space attacks. And in case Kvaratskhelia drops deep over here, then Nuno Mendes stays out wide to provide that width and link up with him. But basically, even then, if Kvaratskhelia, because we saw that in one of the earlier matches against Atletico Madrid and some other teams, when Kvaratskhelia drops deep and Nuno Mendes moves out wide, that again frees up Fabián Ruiz. Because the idea is that when Kvaratskhelia drops deep, one of these guys is going to follow him. And so that's where Fabián Ruiz makes the runs. And they can even launch a ball over the top, depending on where Real Madrid is playing their line. In PSG's first goal, Doué was the guy on the inside. They happened to get the ball to him, and now Fran Garcia and Rüdiger were the guys trying to mark him. But Doué is a really good dribbler, as I said, and so now he's beating these guys, and both of them weren't aggressive enough to stop him. So that Doué skill came in handy. Dembélé had dropped deep, and Kvaratskhelia and Fabián Ruiz were inside. So over here we see Valverde. Now what happens is that Doué passes the ball over here. There's a block, and Dembélé is the false nine. So because he's a false nine, he's not up there in the attack. But what he does have is that once this ball was saved, he's become a really aggressive presser under Luis Enrique, In fact, we made this video about Luis Enrique trying to get Mbappé to press, but that wasn't happening. And once Mbappé left and he got Dembélé and the front three to press very aggressively, that's the secret behind PSG's turnaround and rise. And so Dembele, he's looking at you like a tiger and he's always ready to pounce. So he saw that Raul Asensio has got the ball and he isn't expecting him. So Dembele goes and he presses him very aggressively. And there a mistake happened, and that's how PSG's first goal happened. Okay, now the other thing is that once Asensio had the ball and he'd lost it, Valverde was just ball watching. And the reason is that because he's not a natural fullback, he has to clear the ball from out there. But he didn't do that. He kept watching, and PSG just ended up scoring. That is why it's very important Real Madrid do have Trent on the pitch because obviously, fine, he does have defensive lapses, Trent, but at least he's a better fullback than Valverde. And so once if Trent is on the pitch and Valverde is playing here instead of Arda Güler, and Valverde is a physical guy who has a lot of work rate, so he is gonna stop these zones over here. So getting to Fabián Ruiz, Valverde, he's gonna track back and he's gonna stop him. And that, if that was the situation in this match, Real Madrid have been more balanced, and the two goals that Fabián Ruiz scored, there's a probability that he might not have scored those two goals. How did PSG get their dominance in the game? Well, they pressed very aggressively, and the way they pressed was they did it with about 6 or 7 guys in the opponent's half. So this was basically the zone they were looking at, and they were pressing Real Madrid very aggressively, not letting them get the ball. Fine, the two defenders they can have it, but other than that, everything's going to be very tight. For Real Madrid, that's what they were looking at. Once PSG was playing a high line, they looked to make those runs, and they did. But the speed with which PSG dropped back, that work rate was just amazing. And we saw this amazing block from their defender who took out Mbappe. When these two high fullbacks, that's what was key to PSG pressing high with obviously their front three who were very aggressive. As I said before, Dembele, he looks at you like a tiger. Once that sideways pass happens, he's going to come at you. What Real Madrid were looking to was once they did have a little bit of the ball, they tried to connect with their forwards or midfielders in between the lines. As soon as they did that, this zone was so close enough and PSG was so aggressive that they, would eventually just win the ball back really quickly and then launch into against the run play. And so it wasn't just all slow passing like Manchester City does, that 15, 20 passes to get into shape and then the attack. What PSG did look to do was that if they did win the ball in the counter press, they do look to counter attack and move fast behind the lines. At times, PSG had just two guys at the back, and Real Madrid did get their chances, but they just know how to do their high press perfectly. And once you do that without delay and with perfection, even if you have a rest defense of two and Real Madrid has an attack of Vini and Mbappe and Garcia, who are really fast guys, especially Mbappe and Vini, they still could not beat that rest defense of two, even though they had at times a 3v2 advantage. It just didn't happen. And that is because of their aggressive high press. The problem with Real Madrid was they also wanted to do that high press thing. But under Ancelotti, they've usually played this 4-4-2 sort of a system, and it's been a very passive system. So they're not used to pressing as soon as they lose the ball. They take a lot of time. And once faced with a team like PSG, what happened is that because PSG is so dominating that even if Real Madrid were pressing high initially, they eventually started to drift back because they knew they weren't getting the ball. And that press wasn't working because it was a delayed press. They're just not used to doing that as as soon as they lose the ball. They take too much time to do that, and everything has to be coordinated. And so that coordination isn't there. It's going to take time to build. And then plus you got some old guys here like Rüdiger and all that. And then obviously the team's not balanced because Valverde is playing out of position. And Arda Güler, he's not one of those pressers. He's more of a guy who's going to attack and move out wide, which he did to connect, but it didn't really work out this game because PSG was too much quality there. Another thing what happened was that because Real Madrid are not used to it, and let's say if these guys are pressing, and by the way, the front two of Real Madrid, they're not pressers at all. So they're going to press for a bit because Xabi Alonso is going to tell them to, but they're not going to be able to do it most of the game. Same problem Enrique had with Mbappé. So Vinny and Mbappé, they're both basically guys who pretend that they're doing a lot of work, but they're not going to do it. So this high pressing system, it's going to be a big miracle if Xabi Alonso does get them to do it. And if they don't do that, which they haven't so far, so what happens is that if these guys are pressing like with not much intensity, and then these guys also start to press, a huge gap forms over here, even between these two lines and these two lines, because everything is delayed. And that is the area where PSG did start finding the ball because there were too much gap. The distance was too big. Let's get to the second goal by PSG. What happened was that Real were playing with three at the back, and it was sort of a midfield situation right around the half line. They were trying to build up. And so Rüdiger had the ball, and PSG had a 6 versus 4 situation over here. Dembélé, the Tiger, he pressed Rüdiger, and Rüdiger ended up making a mistake and just went straight up solo. Courtois couldn't stop him. Goal. So that was 2-0. Yeah, it was actually Bellingham that passed the ball back, and the mistake happened from Rüdiger. All this that happened in the first 8 minutes. PSG were up 2-0, and that's where Real Madrid had already lost the game. Although mentally they were trying to come back, but against a team like PSG, it did start looking difficult unless PSG started making mistakes, which they rarely do. They're a very disciplined outfit. So in PSG's third goal, Real Madrid were pressing high, and PSG was trying to build up from the back. And so it was Valverde that went and pressed PSG. So Vitinha and Mendes. So in theory, this is all good. It's a 4 versus a 2 sort of a situation, or you can say a 4v4. So the press did work. But what happened was that because of this, PC started rotating the ball on this side. And that's where the mistake happened because PSG did this deliberately to pull Real Madrid into a mistake. Once they rotated the ball here, so once Hakimi got the ball, it was Bellingham who came out to mark him. And once Bellingham did that, we see this huge space over here. And so this guy, he drops in deep, and Hakimi makes the pass to him. And then, it's all one touch from there because as soon as Hakimi makes the pass, he makes that run. And if Doué's outside, Hakimi goes inside. Doué's inside, Hakimi goes outside. That same principle. But they wanted to create that space here and then do things really fast before everybody else jumped in. And fine, if this guy jumped in, then this space is open. So obviously, guy from here is going to jump in. But everything is, it's so wide. And because they rotate the ball really fast, they want to shift Real Madrid either to that side and then move here, or to this side and then move there. So in this instance, it was Hakimi who got the ball, and Bellingham was out of position. And Dembele also plays a role because then he drops into position as well, and as a false nine. And so that attack is created, and eventually they get the ball here, and again, it's Fabián Ruiz playing that half space and getting the ball, and Courtois is like a sitting duck. So now it's 3 goals. If you look at the time stamp of all this, it's just 20 something minutes. Then the match is pretty much over. The smart thing that Luis Enrique does is that he doesn't let PSG continue pressing for 90 minutes like crazy. What he does is he knows he has a season up ahead. Did this last season as well. They know that they got a lot of matches. It's killing these footballers and all that with so many games. What he does is, okay, so now they take a passive approach and they let Real Madrid have the ball. And that's why in the second half it looked like as if Real Madrid were playing a better game. It was because PSG was probably letting them. They did the same against Inter Miami. They scored 4 goals, and then they were like, okay, fine, let's just keep playing around. So Miami started playing better, but obviously nothing was going to happen other than, okay, Messi doing his magic. We also saw this against Liverpool. We also saw this against Arsenal. It wasn't high press the entire time. When they went to Anfield, they weren't even trying to control possession. They were looking for balls over the top. They were looking to counterattack. So all these moves are deliberate from Luis Enrique. So in the second half, right towards the end of the game, PSG obviously attacking towards this side now, and Real Madrid attacking towards that side. And obviously PSG is letting them have the ball. Madrid is playing much better. And obviously they're chasing those goals. So it's 3-0 and Madrid want to pull one goal and then another, and then if they'd succeeded in doing that, it would have become a very tight and open game then, because then PSG would have to move high again and give Madrid that space to exploit. It was Real Madrid that was actually playing the high line. PSG find that space bit behind Real Madrid's high line, and Gonzalo Ramos, he makes that run here, and he ends up scoring. It was 4-0, and being from Portugal and the unfortunate passing of Diogo Jota, Gonzalo Ramos's goal celebration was in tribute to Jota. PSG, they won this game 4-0. They totally demolished Real Madrid. And let's see what happens in the final, because Chelsea, with Enzo Maresca and all the players Chelsea have, they have a huge squad. Will be more of a tactical fight between two high possession coaches who have actually trained their teams to play possession dominating game. They're both from the Pep Guardiola and Cruyff school of thought, and that I think is going to be a much more exciting match. Although, yeah, fine, PSG is better, but it's not going to be a one-sided game. At least that's what I think. So, but you never know. I think it's going to be a fight. Let's see what happens.